You hear recovery, you feel nothing. Headlines say growth is back, spending is improving, confidence surveys are rising. Your bank balance disagrees. In rugby, the team can win and the winger can still have a quiet game. The economy can expand, your wages can stall. We've reviewed recent data, GDP ticking up, corporate margins stabilising, executive bonuses returning in some sectors, wage growth lagging. Households feel squeezed because, well, they are. Costs adjusted faster than pay packets. Recovery does not come evenly. Capital responds first, labour responds later. That delay compounds pressure. There is a structural reason wage growth trails asset growth. Most people never examine it. Westpac's latest economic overview is out. Details are on their website. Kelly, if GDP is improving but wages are flat, who is actually benefiting from this recovery?
Right now, actually, businesses are getting the better end of the stick. And they would argue that they're due for that because perhaps they held on to staff in the last couple of years that they didn't quite have enough work for. So now what we're seeing is a cyclical improvement in productivity, where we're getting output growth, but we're not necessarily getting the employment growth right now. But as we get on, I think that'll change and businesses will have to hire more. That unemployment rate will start to fall and you'll start seeing that upward pressure on wages eventually.
If unemployment peaks then falls, why don't wages surge immediately?
It all has to happen at a lag. And one way of thinking about the lags is that, usually when GDP goes up, firms start doing a bit more, but they're reluctant to commit to hire, right? Hiring a person is a big deal. I mean, you can't just hire somebody and get rid of them tomorrow. You've got to invest a bit of time and effort into training them. So what that usually means is that firms have to be quite confident about the future before they start committing to adding more staff. That's why you get a lag between activity and employment. And then if you think about the employment cycle, it takes a long time for the unemployment rate to really start to fall. Now, right now, we've got 5.4% unemployment rate, right? And probably a long-run neutral level of the unemployment rate is probably closer to 4.3 or 4.5%. Right now, there's no need for firms to put up wages because there's not a lot of competition in the workplace for workers. But that will change, basically as demand increases, as more and more people will get hired, that pool of available workers will get smaller, that unemployment rate will fall. And then the employers, when they go out to try to look for people, are going to go, well, actually, we're going to have to up the pay rates here to be able to get people in. And that raises the pay rates of the people already in the firm as well. So you end up with a bit of a lag cycle in these things.
How much lag is still in the labour market?
Oh, I think we've got a wee bit to go. 5.4% is where the unemployment rate is at the moment. We expect it to start falling a little bit in the next quarter. But we think that by the end of this year, we'll be at 4.7% unemployment. And that's after a year of 3.3% growth. Once we get down to 4.7%, you're getting in the zone of that kind of long run, sort of neutral level. So, once we're getting into next year, that could be when the wage pressures really start to warm up a bit more.
Of the 4.7%, how many percent do you think are people who are actually unemployable?
So how they evaluate the 4.7% is they actually look at the people unemployed relative to the workforce. And there is a component there of people that will struggle to find a job even in the best economic circumstances for various reasons. Probably, the underlying structural level of unemployment, it might be 3% of that 5.4% that we've got now. We certainly saw the unemployment rate fall in the last cycle to a low of around about 3.2%. And we got a lot of wage inflation at that stage because workers were screaming out for workers. They couldn't find them. So even though there were people technically on the unemployed, they weren't being employed probably because it was really hard to make use of them.
That's really interesting. Potentially what you're saying is the real reason, the real number of unemployed in this country is 2.4%. If you're thinking that 3.3% is unemployable, because there are some people who are unemployable, it's just the nature of it. So when does migration suddenly make a factor in all this?
Well, migration is usually the escape valve here in the system. Um, in terms of our framework, I would say that the slack in the labour market is probably equivalent to about 1% of the unemployment rate. Now, once we get ourselves from the current 5.4 down to 4.4, I think that labour market will be starting to look a bit tight at that stage. Not extremely tight, but a bit tight. And what usually happens when that happens is that firstly, Kiwis stop leaving the country because why would you want to? There's good opportunities here. Why take the big shift and go overseas? And the other thing is that firms start looking abroad for staff because the pool of available workers becomes increasingly unsuited for what they want to use in their own businesses. So you tend to see inward migration pick up as well.
So currently, departures to Australia are more a wage signal compared to a lifestyle signal.
Oh, I think it's very much a signal of wages and employment opportunities as well. We can see quite a good correlation between the difference between the New Zealand and the Australian unemployment rate and net migration. And that mainly reflects the net flows of Kiwis backwards and forwards across the Tasman because it's quite easy for us to decide to go one side or the other.
What does subdued wage pressure actually mean for Mr. and Mrs. New Zealand and their household in 2026?
Well, subdued wage inflation, I think, is it means that the cost of living pressures that they feel they're under are not necessarily changing very much very quickly. Inflation itself is still sitting, it's around 3%. We think it'll be probably closer to 2.4% by the time we get to the end of the year. Wage growth is probably going to be a little bit above that level, maybe closer to 3%. So people will be able to make do and keep up, but they won't necessarily be getting ahead through their wages. They may be getting ahead by the fact that their mortgage rate is lower. For people that are currently either short of work or out of work, there'll be increasing opportunities for all of those people because going from having no or half a wage to a full wage is quite a big difference.
So let's look at those figures again. What did you say? Growth was going to be 3.3% and wage growth was going to be 3.3% and inflation is 2.4%. So you're only really 1% up year on year, but
That's right. At this stage of the cycle, that's exactly right. And that's why I said at the start that businesses are the ones that are currently getting the good end of the stick right now because their costs are not really rising as much. But the output that they're generating, the demand is increasing by more right now.
But that's good news for the Reserve Bank if wages are only going up in real terms by 1% because that will keep inflation down.
That's right for this year. But looking forward to next year, you have to think about, well, what will that labour market look like at the end of the year after we've had that year of growth? And that's the story here that they'll be thinking about is that probably it's the case, at least on the basis of our forecast, that that excess capacity in the economy will have been exhausted by the start of next year, which means that any further increases in demand at that point are going to become increasingly inflationary. There are usually lags between when interest rates impact the economy. So the Reserve Bank won't wait until all of the capacity has been used up before moving. They would normally start moving a bit sooner than that.
And I want to stress again that your latest report is extremely conservative because of the way the market has been the last couple of years. These are conservative numbers you're putting out.
We think so, yeah. I mean, I asked the team, tell me what you think the balance of risks are around these forecasts, and they all told me that they thought it was fairly evenly balanced. Um, the actual level of growth that we've seen in the last few months could easily justify a stronger growth forecast than what we currently have. But we also have to remember that we've got an election coming in the second half of the year. There's an announcement every day, basically coming from the US administration that has the potential to disrupt things. So I think what will be critical is trying to assess, will we have that good head of steam in the economy once we get to the middle of the year?
If you want more details, where can they find them, Kelly?
You can find them on our Westpac New Zealand website. You can look at Westpac IQ, which is our group website, which has all of our economics research. You also look at my LinkedIn page, which has links to all of our best reports.
Kelly Eckhold, Chief Economist from Westpac. Thank you again for your time.
Thanks very much, Craig.
Recoveries are uneven. The first people to feel better are not always the people working hardest. If wages lag and rates rise again, the window for smart decisions is narrow, and narrow windows punish hesitation.